So, revenue generators. Property optimization strategies. So we get a new property that's maybe not performing all that well. How are we going to get it to perform, right? So just breaking down some of the basics, we covered a lot of it earlier, but I want to kind of put it together in the journey of taking that property and maximizing the cash flow for one property under that circumstance. Defining the theme, marketing to that customer base with the right tools, making sure we have the curb appeal that makes it inviting and engaging, a place to live or a place to work is important. Making sure the paint's clean, the signage is there, the flags are out, the signage has the information about where the rental office is or who to call to get that information, making sure that's clear and easily accessible. If there's landscaping, if there's not landscaping, making sure that it's current and relevant, not overgrown and not omitted, right? Isolating your non-performing units from your performing units and addressing those, walking those units, making sure they're ready to be shown. That's going to be critical. Getting them released, as we talked about earlier. And now it's time to increase the rents for the property. Going out and doing your market surveys for those great tools that we talked about earlier. Apartment.com, Rent.com, CoStar, LoopNet, whatever that appropriate tool is for the type of product. Finding out what the market survey is and sending out your notices. 30, 60, 90-day notice, right? Be sure to send out the notice in the appropriate amount of time, and then you want to be increasing those rents across the board. 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and being consistent. If you have deviations because you have highly upgraded units, you want to be writing that in your property procedures. Whatever you decide to do, it's fine as long as you're doing it consistently and you've documented your property procedures, right? Because we want to make sure that if anybody asks us why my rent's this and my rent's that, we have a reason, right? And it's that we're being consistent and fair and applying those rules consistently. Now, at the end of the day, for example, if it's a 1 bedroom and everybody's at a different rate, their increase may vary, right? And that's okay. So those going to the 2 bedrooms or the 3 bedrooms or those with the retail space, the rent increases may vary as long as at the end of the day you're getting them to the same place, right? And then we can add the value adds, and we'll get into what those value adds are and some of those additional revenue generators shortly. One of the great ways to increase revenue on multifamily or commercial properties is looking at common space. Common space that might not be currently utilized. Maybe a clubhouse, maybe it's an office, maybe it's a storage area. Could that be renovated, remodeled, open up to make it an open air space, add a little Wi-Fi, maybe some coffee or cappuccino machines, a few couches, and all of a sudden you're renting that out for a meeting room, for a social gathering, for birthdays, for retirement parties, whatever. But if you have a vacant space that isn't being utilized, it's, could maybe become a revenue generating source with a little bit of modification, enhancements. And it creates a nice used space that those tenants can enjoy that they might not otherwise. RUBS programs. There's a very costly water conservation, and cost of water is going up. We have a lot of buildings out there that don't have distributed metering. And a way to virtually distribute the cost is through programs such as RUBS, water, trash, sewage, and so forth. And basically what they do is they take once you put your property under that program, they take your utility bill and they distribute the cost to your tenants based on size of unit, number of tenants, space utilization, and so forth. They bill the tenants, collect that revenue stream, take their fee, and send you a check. Now you have another source of revenue, right, to help you offset some of these utility costs that are creeping up on us, right? I would just say be cognizant of what your competitors are doing, because if utilities are included in the rent and you're also maximizing your rent, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're not competitive. So you may not be able to go up as high on the rent if you're going to be introducing a RUBS program. It's just something to be aware of and really something to look into as we move forward. Yes.
How does that hold up in court? I mean, since
in terms of which aspect?
You have a multi-unit property and you only have 1 meter, and you're saying that you're measuring they're basing the bill, the utility bill, on the size of the unit. Couldn't someone go to court and say, wait a minute, I have a 3-bedroom unit, but I'm the only person living there versus?
Yeah, those are some of the variables they take into consideration: size of unit, number of tenants, and utilization. I won't profess to be able to speak to it, that level of detail as some of these vendors. I just wanted to introduce it as a concept. There are vendors out there that do manage this, and I do suggest at least looking into it as a viable option. Now, when it comes to collecting rent due, right, this would probably not be something you'd be able to itemize as past due, right, Rose?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So rent, you can itemize all back rent, damage and repairs that they have caused, things like this. Something like this, to your point, how does it hold up in court? You wouldn't be able to say itemize that they haven't paid their utility bill as issued through their RUBS vendor, right? So that would be a delineation. The rest of those details, I would recommend reaching out to those vendors and going through that. I have talked to a couple. I'll be honest, we haven't as of yet implemented it, but I do think it's an interesting concept, and I wanted to bring that up so that you guys can all be looking into that, as well as the water prices are just really getting up there. Yes?
So I recently purchased a property where the previous owner did have a RUBS agreement with an organization.
Yeah, how did that work out?
At that property, it worked out beautifully. It worked out beautifully because it was already in their lease that they had to pay water.
Yes.
I had a second property where the lease was, their tenants' leases were time for renewal. So instead of raising their rent, what I did was tell them that they were responsible for water.
Right.
It was great for them, great for me, because the water prices, as everyone knows, are going up and up and up, and they're
Right.
only going to do that. And tenants have really don't have a desire to lower their water consumption if they're not paying for it.
Exactly.
Now they have a desire to lower the consumption of water. The downside is the tenants, they don't like change. And so now when they hear that they are paying for their own water, they don't like it. No one has moved out. Demand is very great. So if you are thinking of making the change, now would be a good time to do it, because demand is still very strong. They're probably not going to move out if you do that. Maybe let them know that instead of a rent increase, you're going to let them pay the water. But for us, it worked out very well. With regards to the court, landlords are not permitted to divide up non-meter, or if you only have 1 meter, we're not permitted to do that. However, this organization, I had a conversation with them, and I was concerned about that.
Yeah.
They are permitted to do that.
Yes.
If your tenants call the water company will tell them that it's not permitted to be done, but the water company, I'm assuming, is thinking that I am passing on the cost, not this particular organization.
Yes.
For me, it worked out very well.
Yes. I've heard really good things, and I think that's a great strategy. This year, we're not increasing rents. In lieu of rents, we're going to distribute the water costs, and it's yours to conserve, it's yours to save, and you have more control over this variability. I think that's great. That's good feedback. Thank you. Yes?
Section 8 is another organization that would not allow, they would not pay for it. So
Yes. There are some circumstances where you may not be able to pass that along. You made the great point about the when the lease comes to term. That is one thing the vendors did articulate, that you want to roll this out and implement it when leases come to term. So that may have to take a year to get everybody onto the program based on when those leases term, right? So that's another thing to be cognizant of. But yeah, no, so another great way to generate revenue. Thank you. So interest rates are low. There's product on the market. There's product that's coming online. We all know with more properties, we get more write-offs and we can get more cash flow. So another thing to consider while the rates are low is possibly doing some cash out rate buys and acquiring some additional property, either new build. You're all seasoned investors, right? Maybe potentially picking up some land and going in on a build, right? Because we make the money on the buy, we make the money on the build, right? I know working from a builder, it's quite a lucrative business, right? Being the builder. So that might be another channel to think about. Gosh, I wish you could see this slide. This is an example of putting it all together. And what does that mean to the net operating income? We have a portfolio of one of our clients, 10 buildings or so, 330 units, multifamily spread out throughout the Inland Empire area. And in 2014, they were managing the majority of them. We slowly staggered those into our management, right? Their net operating income was about $227,000. So kind of small for that many units, right? By the time we were done and we implemented all of these different strategies, and each one of them has a bit of an effect, right? At the end of 2015, they realized $478,000 net operating income. So we're really pleased with that progress, and we're projecting quite a bit more for this year. For at the end of 2016, we're projecting about $750,000 net operating income. We've also made the decision, as you know, write-offs are key. You know, now all of a sudden they have extra money to manage, and write-offs are important to offset that. So we've decided with them to reinvest into the properties. It's another great strategy, right? You know your assets. Yeah, right. So you can decide if you're going to put $2,500 to $3,500 into your unit turnover, if you're going to be putting maybe $10,000 or $20,000 into the units, taking those units to a whole nother level and a whole nother level of income, right? Make sure you're in the right territory to do that. San Diego is a pretty strong market these days, as I understand it. And again, depending on where you're at within San Diego. But that's another great strategy. So having a lot more income is fantastic, but having the strategy to offset